Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/WeHaveWays.
Romans, I will give you the greatest games on earth!
Show them you can fight or die trying.
From the producers of 300.
A 4-horse race is a suicide.
Let the games begin!
Starring Oscar winner Anthony Hopkins.
Behold, this arena will be built for Rome.
Rise or die.
Those About to Die. A new Peacock original series streaming July 18th.
Achtung, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk USA with me, James Holland, here in Blighty, and with John McManus over in Ohio.
Missouri, as wonderful as Ohio is, I went a little further west.
Missouri, I beg your pardon. I take it all back. That's me getting my geography all wrong. But anyway, in Missouri. But anyway, how are you?
Great. I just got back Friday night.
Wow.
Long trip, about 3+ weeks over your way.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just amazing. I mean, as you know, we hooked up at one point during the 80th anniversary.
Yes.
Craziness. So I was with the World War II Museum.
We were threatened to be undone by a river obstacle.
Yeah, exactly. We got over the Pegasus Bridge river obstacle. I've never seen that bridge go up like that. That was amazing. So it did 3 times in the 2 hours. And then, so the World War II Museum just had an incredible 80th cruise and tour. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of that. So it was fun and crazy and hectic and, uses up all your energy, but in such a good way. I was glad to be there. Yeah,
well, I was very peripherally involved because on the return leg, there was a kind of sort of optional Battle of Britain bit. So on the kind of final dinner, I went in to give them my 2 barrels worth of the Luftwaffe weren't up to it kind of stuff. But anyway, it was all great fun. And it's always good hanging out with those guys. And I love you see Sarah Kirksey and various others. So
she's the best.
Darcy and the gang. They're amazing people, aren't they, that run those. But anyway, while great events are 80 years ago are going on in Normandy, pretty big events are going on in the Pacific, aren't they? I mean,
yeah,
man, it's bad how we just ride out the Pacific. I mean, I know there are people who are obsessed with the Pacific War and there's those who are kind of, fully focused on Northwest Europe. But I was talking to someone yesterday and we were saying, why is it that everyone's so totally focused on D-Day and Normandy and Northwest Europe the moment D-Day happens? And I guess it's because there's lots to see there and you can just go across the channel and there are all the beaches and there's Saving Private Ryan and so on. But really, the events going on in the Pacific are just astonishing, aren't they? I mean, this is a really pivotal moment, summer of 1944, and I'd be really into. I kind of know your view on this, but for me, what makes it so interesting is we already know that quantitatively the US has far exceeded the Japanese by this point. But it's qualitatively, I think, that there's the big leap forward. You suddenly see that change in terms of the capabilities of the Japanese Imperial Navy aviators. That they're just not getting enough training. They're being kind of flung to the wolves in terms of seamanship, in terms of quality of troops. Everything is just not as good.
Yeah, the Americans have quality and quantity at this point. So like on the naval aviation side, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, which of course is the centerpiece naval fight for the Marianas campaign, the Americans have them outnumbered 2-1 in terms of planes and capital ships, fleet carriers. Mm-hmm. And obviously they have them, they have a qualitative advantage too in terms of the aircraft, the aviators, and all the rest. That's just one example, among many. So one of the talks I gave on this recent tour focuses on the kind of beyond Normandy American global war, and I would argue, with the possible exception of Britain, There's no other country that fights a global war like the United States. And this is really kind of unprecedented in history when we think about the size and scale before and since.
I mean, just imagine that. You're so right. I mean, just think about where they're fighting.
Everywhere. I mean, every corner of the globe. And, because Diadem had gone on in Italy, you've got the 15th and 8th Air Force doing their thing. You've got Burma. The North Burma campaign going on, and of course the submarine campaign in the Pacific, and then the Marianas, and of course MacArthur.
Operations in China.
And China, exactly. And then MacArthur in New Guinea and going to Biak. And, so it's just an enormous global war of which the Marianas are arguably in some ways, certainly from Admiral Ernest King's standpoint, the head of the Navy, the centerpiece. Really what Normandy is to Europe, the Marianas are to the Pacific War, to the Pacific aspect of the war. And in terms of American naval hardware, we've got more invested, to that operation in the Pacific. It's called Operation Forager, the Marianas, than we do in Normandy, because Normandy is a major team effort in the way that the Marianas are really not. The Marianas are an American effort with a little bit of Australia sprinkled in too. So it's really kind of staggering, I think, just to step back and think about that level of capability. It's really just kind of mind-blowing.
It's absolutely astonishing. Let's just rewind a little bit and do a little bit of kind of background. So where are the Marianas? They're out in the middle of the mid-Pacific, aren't they?
They're in the Central Pacific.
Central Pacific. You've got Mariana Islands. Is Guam part of the Marianas?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So that's a little bit to the south, isn't it?
Correct.
But the main two together are Saipan and Tinian. They've all got airfields on Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. There's also Rota, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. But the three primary ones are Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. So the significance of all this is not just these islands themselves, but the fact that if we can get bases there, with the B-29 now coming into production, we can bomb the Japanese home islands with some level of impunity. And that's sort of the game changer there. That's why it's so incredibly important. And that's the inner ring of Japan's defenses.
So how far is say, Saipan from Tokyo, do you think?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 1,000 miles, something along those lines. So it's very doable. It's not easy, but it's doable. And the Japanese know this, and that's why this is such vital terrain for them. Plus, Saipan to them is Japanese soil in the sense that they had colonized it, mainly after World War I. They had turned into a major sugar refining and production area. And so you had this sort of Japanese settlement there, in addition to those who had already lived there.
Right.
The more indigenous peoples from around that kind of archipelago of islands.
Yeah, because this is just it's like a big semicircle of volcanic islands, in the middle of the ocean, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And so, people had lived there, but they'd been semi-colonized by the Germans and all this too. But by the 1920s, this is Japanese-dominated territory, with the exception, of course, is Guam, which was a U.S. possession. There was a legacy of the Spanish-American War.
Right. But which had been taken over by the Japanese, hadn't it?
Exactly, in 1941. So the dynamic on Guam is very different than Saipan, which is kind of like Japanese soil that you're taking, kind of. Whereas Guam, the population there is very pro-U.S. and really had been heavily repressed, especially in 1944 as these events get closer. The population there is really in a tough strait.
Sure.
So partially this is a liberation operation too, in addition to just seizing airfields like we're always doing in the Pacific. So you have that aspect of it. And then, of course, Forager is a naval battle too.
And of course, there's the your dogs in the background, kind of keeping everyone happy.
Yeah, they're on watch. Like good infantrymen, they've got to patrol. Yeah. So yeah. My dog is named Gavin, actually, after a certain general on the airplane side of World War II.
Do you call him the general, or do you just call him?
We do. It's funny. Jim? One of my wife's aunt, my wife Nancy's aunt, likes to call him the general. She'll call and say, "How's the general doing?" That's
so brilliant.
Yeah.
I want to get another dog just so that I can call him Alexander or something.
You should.
Or maybe Wayne.
Wow, Wayne, I better be Tall Cotton there, my friend, if he gets a dog name after him. Yeah, so anyway, I apologize that they're a little noisy at times. But yeah, so Forager, unlike Normandy in a way, is an air, land, and sea battle that in a way Normandy isn't quite. Not that there isn't any German air-sea opposition, but it's quite feeble compared to what the Japanese have the capability of and in mind. So the Japanese know the Americans are coming for the Marianas, and they know how vital it is. So they have a plan to...
And why do they know that? Why, is it just because it's so obvious?
It's so obvious. Yeah, I mean, Nimitz has been working toward this, and what happened, actually what sets up the Marianas is Operation Flintlock, which I think we had an episode on that one time.
Right.
The Marshalls. And so when the Americans get the Marshalls by early February, it really accelerates the timetable that we can go on to the Marianas. The Japanese understand that, so they're beefing up the Marianas as much as they can.
Right.
And their plan is basically to have a lot of land-based air, especially at Guam, and at Saipan too, but Guam, and to have a belt of submarines on the approaches.
Yes.
The tandem of which they hope will degrade Spruance's Fifth Fleet, Admiral Spruance, who's the commander.
Yeah, and it does exactly the opposite, doesn't it?
It does exactly the opposite. So what they wanted to do is they want to pin the Americans there, degrade them, and then a major fleet would come over from the Philippines, and then, have this big fleet engagement and really change the naval quotient to the war. Well, this unravels pretty quickly because the subs get almost all sunk.
Yeah, there's 25 of them, aren't there, and 17 are sunk or something like that.
I think there's 17 out of 21, or I don't, but yeah, most of them. The attrition is terrible. And then the land-based air at Guam just gets clobbered by Admiral Mark Mitcher's naval aviators. He launches strikes as of like June 11th and 12th, which kind of takes the Japanese by surprise and really kind of takes that option off the board for them. So what's interesting too, and I think this is neat because you can kind of see how the pieces of the Pacific War fit together a little bit. This innocuous battle that we hardly even remember that was going on while Normandy was going on, Biak, in late May and early June, the Japanese had originally intended that would be the place they'd have this naval showdown. But then when Spruance's forces, when they detect them moving toward the Marianas, they're like, oh, this is bigger game. Let's pivot there. So that, for what that means, if you're a Japanese soldier on Biak as part of the 222nd Infantry Regiment, you're kind of marooned now to just fight as best you can.
Yep. You're absolutely stuffed. But also, just to rewind a little bit, I mean, the Japanese have been desperate, part of this desperate attempts to kind of reinforce these islands. They've been sending over loads of ships. And in sharp contrast to the Japanese submarines, the US submarines are now starting to really hit their straps. The problems with the torpedoes that they've had in 42, 43, they're starting to kind of be resolved. And of course, the US Navy's submarine force is starting to gain massively in experience. And I think the Americans are very sensible in not allowing submarine commanders to have too long out in action. You do a couple of fairly lengthy missions, maybe 3, and then you're kind of given a desk job for a bit, or you're put into training or whatever, and the next level down then get promoted. So unlike you don't have that situation with the Germans in the Atlantic where they're putting kind of really inexperienced crews out and getting slaughtered. And ditto now with the Japanese Imperial Navy as well. Their submarines, they're just inexperienced. They just don't have the experience to kind of be able to do what they need to do, which is submarine warfare requires skill, sixth sense, huge amount of experience, blah blah blah, and they just don't have it. So by this time, the U.S. Navy submarine force in the Pacific is becoming really super potent.
Oh yeah,
and something like 30,000 Japanese troops are drowned.
Oh, yeah.
Being sent en route to the Marianas. I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, that's crazy. That's 2 entire divisions.
Yep.
Sunk, drowned, gone.
If you are a Japanese commander at any of these garrisons, you can expect that probably anywhere from 10 to 25% of whatever is coming to you is going to be lost. And some of the rest of it, by the way, is going to be people who have gone down in the sea and been recovered. I mean, how combat effective are they?
Yep.
How cohesive are those units? Not to mention all the materials, too. The weaponry, the ammo, and all the materials to build bunkers and all that is going to the bottom of the sea. The U.S. subs in this war are going to do to the Japanese what the Germans had hoped to do to the Allies.
Yep.
And so you've got by 44, by this midpoint, you've got experienced skippers, you have pretty good boats, you've got the torpedo situation sorted out, like you said, and a lot of aggressiveness.
And you got torpedoes fore and aft, haven't you, on these subs as well?
Exactly. And so they are just menacing the Japanese, and they're smart too in the orientation in that they're going after the troop ships and the oil tankers and the merchantmen that are really the key to this thing, not as much as the capital ships on some levels. And I think that's kind of the key to their initiative at this point too. So the Vice Admiral Charles Lockwood is the overall commander based back at Pearl Harbor. And like you said, he understands how to rotate his crews. This is, the staggering thing. There are maybe 16,000 Dolphin sailors who do a war patrol at any point in this war. That's basically the size of an infantry division.
Yep.
I mean, think about the bang for your buck that you're getting there. 3,505 of them don't survive. So the death ratio is pretty high, even though they're quite effective, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a player in why we can have the initiative coming toward the Marianas for Operation Forager.
And Nimitz and Spruance, they're kind of hoping that the Japanese fleet will sail out towards them, aren't they? I mean, they're trying to lure them out, aren't they?
Oh, that's exactly they are. So what happens is that they do the landings on June 15th at Saipan.
This is 3 divisions, isn't it? 1 Army division, 2 Marine Corps, 2nd and the 4th.
Yeah, so you've got them organized. You basically, there's the other thing that's mind-blowing about this 5th Fleet. It's basically carrying a troop strength that is like Army level size. So imagine if you put the whole 5th Army aboard ships and sailed them somewhere. That's what this is like. So you have them divided into 2 corps. The 5th Amphibious Corps that's going to hit Saipan, that's 2nd and 4th Marine Division and the Army's 27th Infantry Division. And then 3rd Amphibious Corps, which is supposed to hit Guam, that's got a Marine Division, the 3rd Marine Division, then a Marine Brigade, and then it's got the Army 77th Infantry Division. Great unit. That tandem is over 100,000 just troops, combat troops, much less all the service troops and everything you've got. Okay, so you've got that, and then, of course, you have all these warships, all the carriers, the battleships, so on and so forth. So when Spruance detects that the Japanese are coming to him in the wake of the June 15th Saipan landing, he decides, you know what, I'm going to just sail west of Saipan with my capital ships, with my aviators especially, and I'm going to let them come to me. And I'm also, this is really smart, he's like, I'm going to get my LSTs and all the other supporting ships. I'm going to have them unload more troops and supplies and then get out of the way to the east out of range. And then I'm going to screen the landing beaches with some of my battleships and whatever in case they've got some kind of end run plan. So it's really quite adept, although some will criticize him later for allowing the Japanese to get the first blow in. I think he probably does the right thing here because he knows the advantages he's got and there's no arguing with success.
Obviously, Yamamoto's been killed back in April 1943, and it's Toyota who's taken over, isn't it?
Toyota says something very interesting to his fleet, to his sailors. He says the fate of the empire rests on this one battle. We all must do the utmost, basically. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. That this is Japan's last chance to win some kind of victory that would leave them in possession with an empire in the central and maybe portions of the southern Pacific, much less China.
But they just don't have enough, do they?
They don't. They're outnumbered, and they're outnumbered quantitatively, too.
So Spruance's 5th Fleet alone has 7 battleships, 15 carriers, 891 aircraft, 21 cruisers, 69 destroyers.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Much less all the subs he's got out there.
Whereas Admiral Ozawa, who is the 1st Mobile Fleet commander, he's only got 6 battleships, 9 carriers, 500 aircraft, 13 cruisers, and 28 destroyers. I mean, that is a quantitative difference. You're not going to win with that.
You're probably not going to. But the interesting thing to think about is that if he's against any other power on the planet, he's got an advantage, the Japanese do. I mean, Toyota's fleet, that is
huge,
more than I think probably any other country can muster, except maybe Britain, if it's all hands on deck, quite literally. So it shows you how frustrating this must be for the Japanese. It's a hell of a potent naval force, but it's not enough compared to what Spruance has got.
Yeah.
And the other thing, too, the numbers don't tell the tale in terms of the quality of the aviators, the level of experience, the feel for combat.
That's my big thing.
Yeah, and I think the Americans have a major advantage there.
Yeah, and aircraft like the Zero, you're completely brilliant in 1941 when you've got pilots out who've got over 500 hours in their logbook. But without that experience, without that skill, they're too lightly armed. They just don't have enough to they haven't moved on enough to take on the kind of clearly now much superior American naval fighter planes.
They just don't, especially with the Hellcat in play now. I mean, that's a really good plane, and that's where a lot of our fighter pilots have, of course. And so you've got a lot of them, and they're good planes, good aviators, and plus better radar, way better radar, and code breaking ability adds up to a pretty decided advantage. So this battle generally is known as the Marianas turkey shoot, which kind of tells you how this goes, where famously, they destroy 476 Japanese naval planes and who knows how many other ground bases. I think it's up to 600 by the time we're done with this.
The U.S. Navy loses 20 Hellcats.
Yeah, which is, obviously paltry.
And also there's also the tragedy of the new aircraft carrier, the Taiho.
Yeah.
Which is this amazing state-of-the-art warship. It's Ozawa's flagship. It's absolutely cutting edge, but it's so cutting edge that no one actually knows how to operate it. and the chief engineer on board becomes the ship's captain because he's the only one who knows how to properly sail it. Half the crew don't know how to sail it. So you've got this incredible piece of kit, but you haven't got the crew to man it. And it's one of the ones that goes down. It's brand new, first engagement, boom, boom. Down at the bottom. All that time, all that effort, all that cost, all that engineering.
Yeah. Of course, the Japanese get bloodied pretty quickly, and then they're going to start to retreat, right? So the question is, how far do you pursue them? Spruance, this is the difference, I think, between Spruance and Halsey. Spruance realizes his main mission really is...
This is Admiral Bill Halsey, who, for those who don't know, is one of the big players in the Pacific, one of the great U.S. admirals of the war.
Very aggressive. And so this is really confusing, but basically the way they had set this up, the Navy had, they both commanded the same fleet, they would just alternate.
Right.
It's because they figured there's so much pressure and tension, one guy needs some downtime while the other guy's in charge. So when Spruance was in charge, it was called the 5th Fleet. When Halsey was in charge, it was called the 3rd Fleet. So Halsey is on the bench right now, resting. Spruance is in charge of 5th Fleet. How far is he going to pursue the retreating Japanese? He understands that his main mission really is to protect and screen those landings, because what matters is having the air power base there and controlling those islands, not necessarily sinking every last Japanese ship.
Right.
Halsey, I think, based on his later actions, would have been much more aggressive on trying to go and chase down their fleet and destroy every ship, because that's the way he had sort of been trained. I think Spruance was a much better person to have here. Now, I'm looking at it, of course, too, as always, from a ground soldier's perspective, of saying, well, that's really comes first, securing the ground on some levels. But it's a chicken and egg argument. So Spruance makes that call.
Well, let's take a break in a minute, just very quickly before we do, because I think after the break, let's get back onto the land battle. But just before we do, just tell me a little bit about Spruance and his background and where he's come from. I mean, he's one of the mega admirals of the Second World War, isn't he?
He is, and he's not that well known, because he's so low key.
Not as well known as Halsey, is he?
No, Halsey's much more colorful, much more aggressive. I think Spruance personally was a better admiral all the way around, because he's more circumspect, he's more thoughtful, he understands the strategic dimension, maybe I think a little better than does Halsey. Not that Halsey's a bad commander, I'm not saying that, but I think Spruance is maybe at a different level. Spruance and Nimitz have consummated by now a very strong partnership. At times, Spruance has served as Nimitz's basically his chief of staff. Spruance is a guy who understands how to conserve his energy.
Right.
He takes walks around his flagship to stay in condition, but he will go down and he will sleep.
Right.
And he'll tell his staff, don't mess with me. I need to recharge my batteries.
So he's in the Monty camp of kind of, I need to be fresh to be able to make key decisions.
Yeah. Which I think is smart when you're that old. I mean, we all understand. We understand that now, being that age. It's like, yeah, you need to recharge your batteries a little bit. Spruance, I think, understands that that's going to help him be a better commander. He is very circumspect. He seems a little cold and distant. Right. Because he's not warm and he doesn't connect with his sailors the same way Halsey does. But
does he not? He's a sort of reserved character, is he?
He is, but I think he is the right person for this job on many levels. I think Nimitz recognizes that, and it's one of his better calls. And Spruance, of course, had under duress taken over the naval forces during the Battle of Midway, of course, too, because Halsey was sick at that point with a terrible skin ailment.
Yes.
So Spruance has a lot of experience by now, too, and they both do. So the Americans have the luxury of calling on these two high-caliber commanders for the various battles. The next one, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, is going to be Halsey's, but Spruance at this point is the key guy. I think he's the absolute right guy for what you're trying to achieve in the Marianas.
Okay, well, let's take a quick break. And when we turn, we'll come back to the land battles. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk USA with me, James Holland, and with John McManus in the US. And we're talking about the Marianas and the Battle of Saipan, Tinian, the battle of the naval battle of the Philippine Sea. But let's get back to these land battles, because they're brutal, aren't they? Absolutely brutal affairs. And this is again where the Americans are starting to understand that the kind of modus operandi for the Japanese is whatever troops they've got on that island, you got to kill the lot, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually the way it ends up.
That's how you're going to win, because no one's going to surrender. Very, very, you can count on one hand the amount of people that you'll be able to take prisoner. So it's a fight to the death, and that's a very chilling, horrible prospect.
Yeah. So at this point, the Japanese are in that kind of transition period, like as to how they're going to react to U.S. invasions. They had always thought, we got to stop them at the waterline. Let's defeat them at the waterline. We will stymie the invasion. That's the kind of thing you can think of if you've got the sea and air power to help back that up.
Right.
Increasingly, they don't, and that's partially what's being sorted out in the Battle of the Philippine Sea. So the Japanese at Saipan are still thinking in terms of stop them at the waterline. So in spite of the fact that they've been, really degraded by U.S. submarines and all the rest, they've got 32,000 troops, mostly soldiers, but some naval guys too, some sailors on Saipan, and they have heavily fortified portions of the island, including the beaches that are the obvious place where we're going to land at the southwest part of the island. So the better part of 2 Marine divisions land on June 15th, 1944. That's about 8,000 Marines from the 2nd and 4th Marine Division we're going to put ashore, and they run into a buzzsaw.
Wow.
So imagine, basically, this is Omaha Beach for 2 Marine divisions is what this adds up to. In terms of the casualties they suffer, it's almost exactly like Omaha Beach.
Wow.
They get ashore. They get a foothold.
Really? In the initial assault?
Yeah. It's about 2,500 plus casualties. So we still sort out like how many is Omaha Beach, but I think it's between 2,500 and 3,000-ish, maybe.
Yeah, overall casualties. It's 843 dead, isn't it, I think, on Omaha?
At least. I'd say possibly maybe in the low ones, but it's hard to say because of the missing, I guess. But in this case, it's sort of in that neighborhood.
Yep.
And it is an absolute buzzsaw. Because the Japanese commanders, they have a weird command setup with 2 generals kind of sort of competing for influence. And then you have Admiral Nagumo. You remember him from the Pearl Harbor strike. So he's been backbenched because they feel that he's kind of screwed up the Pearl Harbor strike on some levels. But bottom line, he has a naval headquarters there too. So he's in play. But the way they've sorted out is they've put a lot of their best troops to defend the beaches and pillboxes and bunkers. They've camouflaged a lot of like dummy bunkers and whatnot really well. So that's absorbed some of our bombs and our pre-invasion bombardment. That hasn't done any damage to the Japanese because we think there's real fighting positions and there aren't, So there's that dimension. The other thing that's really interesting about the Saipan invasion, Jim, is the use of underwater demolition teams.
Wow.
What the Navy called frogmen. These are the ancestors to the Navy SEALs, some of them. And if you may have heard of a guy named Draper Kaufman, and he's like a legend now, of course, in the SEAL community, sort of like the father of the SEALs. So he has prepared and trained these intensive UDT guys, about 96 of them, spread out into 2 major forces that are going to go in before the Marines do.
Right.
And the purpose is we got to figure out the tides, the reefs. We've got to create ways for our landing craft to get in there, all this kind of stuff. So these guys paint themselves like almost, chin to toe with certain colors of paint, like blue paint with silver lines, like gray lines. And the reason they do that is they can just stand in the water to get a sense of then immediately how deep is the water. They're trained in explosives, and so they're going in ahead of everybody else in broad daylight.
Wow.
This is not that it's the first mission, but it's the first major invasion that we have this, and we're going to have this the rest of the way. They do an incredible job. Kaufman loses 4 killed and 5 wounded, I think.
Wow.
He was worried that the casualties could have been much higher. He had He wore glasses, and his eyesight was so terrible that he needed sailors next to him to tell him like what the water depth was and what they're handling, like what kind of obstacles or whatever else. So that's how courageous he was. And so these guys really clear the way for the Marines to have a smoother landing than they otherwise might, especially for tanks.
Yeah.
One of the divisions, their original place they were going to send in their tanks, Kaufman realized the water's too deep. It's not going to work. We're going to have all these tanks swamped and everything, kind of similar to Omaha Beach. And so he goes all the way to division commander and lobbies successfully to have them rerouted. That saves who knows how many lives. So, I mean, that's really kind of mind-blowing to think about how they're doing these invasions, too. Because, basically, they're doing the job. You know, those really, like at Normandy, those guys who went in the weeks to the run-up to figure out all this, the tides and the beaches, where they could hold armor and all that kind of stuff. That's what these frogmen are doing in the Pacific now, but usually on D-Day or a day or two before. But pretty quickly they realize that they're going to need all the troops they can ashore.
Right.
For two reasons. One, the fact that you're going to go fight this great naval battle, and you don't want a whole infantry division along for the ride, right?
Right.
Two, you've run into such heavy resistance at Saipan that you got to get the 27th Division ashore. And so they're going to land like June 16th and 17th. It also, we forget this, but the Guam landing is supposed to happen on June 18th. And it gets postponed for another month because the Saipan battle's so heavy.
Yep. They're all landing on the southwest end of the island. And it's a sort of long strung out island, isn't it? With kind of two nodules that sort of stick out on the eastern side, kind of one halfway up, one at the bottom, sort of hills in the middle. I mean, they're called mounts, aren't they? But you wouldn't really call them a mountain, would you? I mean, not exactly. And it's you're not talking about a big area, are you? What is it? No. Maybe 15 miles long, the island, something like that?
15 to 20, something. I mean, I don't know, but not long, like you said. I mean, it's sizable, but not big. I mean, when you think about continental operations, it's nothing. But you've got some population centers, especially along like where the landing beaches are, especially today.
Yep.
And then the capital city of Garapan, which hugs the west coast a little farther up north of the landing beaches. The terrain feature that dominates the whole island is Mount Tapacho, which is right in the heart of the island. And then you've got valleys that slope downward on either side, especially east of it, what's called Death Valley, which is very aptly named. So this is another one of these places that the terrain is ideal for the defenders on many levels. So you got that, and the main airfield is on the southern part of the island. It's called the Islito Airfield.
Yeah, and that's captured in pretty quick order, isn't it? I mean, they catch to the south where it's flat, and they just work their way up northwards, don't they, in stages?
Yeah, so the 27th Infantry Division captures the airfield. I think it's June 17th, 18th. Pretty quickly. And that's really the key objective of the whole campaign. But the fighting is just beginning. So it's weird. It's kind of similar to Peleliu in that respect, that you get the airfield pretty quickly there, but the fighting is just beginning for all this terrible higher ground.
Okay, so why are they doing all this fighting? Why, if you've got the airfield, why don't you just hold fast, build up your supplies, and let these guys starve themselves out?
Well, and I think that would have been a much better go at Peleliu. I've always expressed that opinion. Here, I don't think you quite had that luxury, because there's two elements of high ground that are going to lead to problems if you don't control them. On the sort of southeastern tip of the island, a place called Nafuten Point.
Yep.
That has all this bramble and then ridge lines and sort of higher ground that broods straight over the airfield.
Right.
You've got to deal with that to some extent. And then Mount Tapacho and all the approaches are close enough that you're going to have some issues if they got artillery up there.
Sure, but they're not going to be resupplied, are they? I mean, the Japanese are stuffed.
No, but there's the dynamic too that we worry about, is how long we're going to have our fleet hang around there and be vulnerable, while the ground operations go on. That's always the tension that happens, not just here, but many places.
Okay, so just get on with it is basically the message.
Yeah, and there's always an American idea too, and sometimes I think it's wrongheaded, that you've got to basically clean up and secure the whole island and eliminate the Japanese to the last man and all that business. I don't think it made sense at other islands. I do think it makes some sense here. You've got a pretty restive population that could be a problem too. You're right that they're not going to be resupplied, but they can counterattack.
The Japanese garrison's about just under 30,000. That's not to be sniffed at, is it?
Yeah. Most of them are in that kind of north of the invasion beaches around Montepacho, Death Valley, Garapan, that whole center of resistance, and they fight really well. And it's like a lot of battles we've talked about, whether European theater or Asia Pacific, the slow slugging match of advancing against these guys and how tough it is to be an attacker. I mean, you know what I mean? That's the dynamic here. It's so you're using combined arms, artillery, tanks, infantry. The naval gunfire is helping too. The Navy's worried, of course, because the longer their ships are around, the more vulnerable they could be to attack submarines or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that totally makes sense. And the Army commanders are thinking about it their way. Like, okay, we're trained to fight land battles and to use all of our combined arms and fight incrementally. And I think the Marine commanders are too, in a way. They're not dumb. They're not going to, let's just charge straight at the Japanese in order to win, that whole idea of a jarhead and all that. They're not. They're smart.
Yeah.
So I think, again, this whole Holland Smith thing creates misconceptions about the battle, but it's really the violence of the battle at Saipan rivals anything we see anywhere else in the war between Japan and the Allies.
But generally speaking, I mean, Saipan is seen as a pretty successful and pretty well done operation, isn't it? I mean,
I think so. Yeah, and I think all three of the divisions fight very well there.
Holland Smith and his sacking aside, I mean, you can't really complain about it, can you? I mean, to say right from the beginning, they've got the numbers now. They've got the training to go with it.
Yeah, they do exactly. And I think the sacking of Ralph Smith impedes the U.S. side more than anything.
I'm absolutely sure it does. Yeah,
he's a fine commander, and the division is angry, and it creates all this non-productive inter-service tension and all that garbage. But yeah, I mean, all three divisions, I think, fight very well. And you have this climactic point in the battle. And I think this is the most interesting part of it. July 6th and 7th, when the Japanese commander, who's really kind of controlling things by now, General Saito, decides, I'm not getting reinforced. I'm not going to just sit here and get eliminated piece by piece. I'm going to throw my people at them to try and turn this thing around somehow. We call it a bonsai attack in the West, but really they would think of it as
just an attack.
This is an offensive we're launching. And so you've got about 5,000 guys coming at the core of the 105th Infantry Regiment, which is the lead unit for the 27th Division, that are going to absorb the brunt of this on the night of July 6th and 7th. So this is mainly an Army fight, though there are Marines involved too, artillery and others. And Holland Smith will later claim the Army didn't fight, so now the Marines had to go clean up their mess, which is absolutely so false that it really, honestly, Jim, it almost makes my blood boil all these years later. And I'll tell you why. Because these are people who are fighting to the death on the 27th Division side. The valor is incredible.
So you don't want to make light of their efforts.
Exactly. And I think for someone who wasn't there and didn't know what he was talking about, to impugn really courageous people and their families and everything, all the pain of that. So yes, I must admit that does anger me. There are 3 medals of honor awarded to soldiers that night. One of them, they're all posthumous, by the way, which I think tells us something. One of them goes to an Army dentist who basically decides he had been running an aid station,
right?
Because the doctor had been wounded, and so this guy's name was Ben Salomon, and he says to his aid station when it comes under attack, he says, "All right, you guys get the wounded out the best you can. I'm going to get on this machine gun and try and hold them off." And that's precisely what he does. There's like 90 Japanese bodies around him the next day.
Oh my goodness me!
It's like out of a movie.
Yeah, he's just mowing them down, basically.
He is, yeah. And there's a battalion commander who gets the Medal of Honor. His name is O'Brien. He also self-sacrifices. There's a sergeant who does the same thing.
Wow.
It's that kind of fight. And the 27th Division survivors counted 4,311 Japanese bodies. So think of it from the Japanese perspective of what that's like.
Yeah, absolutely horrendous. But there's also this other civilian tragedy, isn't there? All these people throwing themselves off Marpy Point, which is right up in the northwest. Exactly.
So here's where the whole Japanese colonization thing comes in. Yeah, so you've had a lot of these civilians who are sort of part of the battle, sort of not. And they have been told by the military folks, if the Americans get you, they're going to rape you, they're going to torture you, they're going to kill you and eat you, stories like that. The old Japanese yarns about how in order to be a Marine, you have to kill a parent, all this kind of nonsense. And so they're frightened out of their wits, and they have the same old kind of suicide cult that you see among some of the military people. And they will tragically, some of them throw themselves into the sea off Marpy Point. Others will hold grenades. It's like to their own heads. They'll strangle their own babies. It's just awful.
It's absolutely horrendous, isn't it? And the American soldiers, the Marines and the 27th Division guys, they're witnessing this, aren't they? They're seeing it. They're seeing all these people sort of hurting themselves on cliffs and just thinking, what on earth are you doing? Why would you do this?
Yeah, they can't understand it. They're trying to talk to them, and say, hey, we'll help you. Don't do this. And they're watching.
Here's some cigarettes. Here's some gum.
Yeah, exactly. And they're watching people hurl themselves off cliffs sides into the ocean and all this stuff. It's just, they can't conceive of it.
It's grotesque.
It really is. And so they are able to save some. There are some, but there are others, not so much. And this really affects many of these guys, as you can imagine, for the rest of their lives. The tragedy of that. On the Japanese side, when Saito was planning the last ditch attack, one of his staffers asked him, what are we going to do about the civilians? What about them? And he said, there is now no difference between the military and civilians. We're all in the same boat. So whatever happens to them is fine with me. It was so callous.
And what are U.S. casualties on this? I mean, because if most of the garrison of the Japanese garrison, all 20, 30,000 or whatever, has gone, presumably American casualties weren't as bad as that.
You'll often hear the figure of 14,111, I think, but it's U.S. casualties are actually higher than that when we factor in combat fatigue, disease,
of course,
sunstroke, whatever. I think it's closer to about 20,000. It's about a 23% casualty rate for the ground troops. That tells you something too, doesn't it?
Doesn't it just?
So all of these guys, the Marines who fight there, the soldiers who fight there, I just think they do an amazing job given what was in front of them, how tough this was.
Yeah, and being here, it's this tiny island, and there's going to be other tiny islands, whether it be Peleliu or Iwo Jima or whatever. But, this is a small island, and, from a defender's point of view, you're stuffed. This is it. You're expected to die for your emperor and family honor and all that kind of stuff. But if you're American and you're landing there, again, you're kind of, all you can see all around you is just sea, albeit sea full of ships on one side. But Saipan is a drop in the ocean. So is Tinian. Guam's a little bit bigger, but these are small places. Forget the violence of the attack, just being there and knowing that you're in this maelstrom from which there is literally no escape on either side, really.
Exactly.
And that you've just got to see this through to the end. What a nightmare.
Awful. Just awful. And on the heels of it, they got to go get Tinian right next door, which is another sharp fight. Holland Smith will only let Marines fight there, so they get the honor, quote unquote, of going there. Guys from I think maybe the 2nd Marine Division, I could be wrong, but they go and they have to fight at Tinian, and that's several hundred more casualties that you're going to have. And of course, famously, obviously, we're going to have a base from which the B-29 that drops the atomic bomb, comes from Tinian later on in the war. So yeah, then the Japanese garrison fights to almost extinction. We get a few hundred prisoners on Saipan. Not very many, but a few.
Over 20,000 killed in this battle.
Oh, closer to 30 on the Japanese side.
That's just incredible number, isn't it? And
staggering.
You can imagine the heat, all the dead bodies and the stink and the kind of ghastliness of the whole thing. And these islands all seem very kind of exotic when you're kind of looking at them through a kind of a vacation prism or whatever, or kind of from a romantic view of kind of sort of islands with palm trees and all the rest of it, and amazing colored seas and all the rest of it. But they're absolutely concentrated killing zones.
They really are.
And that's all you can say about it. There's only one way off, and that's by boat. There's only one way on, and that's by boat, really, or assault craft or whatever.
That's it.
From an attacker or defender, you're stuck there. You're stuck in this place which is far from romantic, and suddenly become, as I say, a total kill zone. Just absolutely horrendous. But June, unquestionably, is an amazingly, June 1944 is a great moment for the U.S. Armed Forces in their global conflict. But it's certainly a mega month in terms of the Pacific War, isn't it? Just proportionally, just as much as it is in ETO.
Yeah, Saipan, Tinian. Then you've got, Biak is going on at this point, in addition to New Guinea. The Dringamore River thing is amping up. Of course, Stillwell and the Mikina or Michinar, whatever you want to call it, in Burma. That whole thing is raging. I mean, you've got the first B-29 raids from China. I mean, it's just like, what isn't happening, right? It's
right. Yeah, no, it's absolutely incredible. I think what we should do is we should maybe look at Guam another time, because that's obviously not till August. But I think it's good to kind of, it's been good to focus on Saipan and Battle of the Philippine Sea.
Guam is really interesting. And we should get into that in some depth. And it could not be more different in terms of the command setup.
Yep.
And the inter-service cooperation there. It is fascinating how different it is.
Well, let's save that for August and marry it up to the 80 years that's passed. But there you are, another battle that's been going on while Normandy has been raging, the Battle of Saipan. And it's a brutal, bloody, terrible, terrible battle. But one, obviously, that's victorious for the United States. And shows, that kind of, it's not just quantitative leap forward for the Americans. It's qualitative and quantitative.
It's both. When you've got both, you have hell of an advantage. That's right.
Well, John, that's been fantastic. Good to see you, as always. And let's make sure that we keep track of these specific battles as we go through the rest of 2024.
Most definitely. Sounds good.
Well, cheerio. Thanks for listening, everyone.
See ya.